Hey, welcome to the Camden Otis Show. We're a father-son business podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about learning, making an impact, and growing their business, 10xing their staff. More to follow on that as we go along. Just putting that little seed out there. Speaking of seeds, Camden, how's that garden coming along?
The garden is coming along great. We got the beets coming through, carrots coming through, wildflowers are popping up. I think I got an iris coming in, so should be really pretty here in about 5 months.
Awesome,
Hopefully
awesome.
some food too.
Yeah, well, then I expect a healthier performance from you, right? Because a better, more natural diet, you're going to do that much better in the performance category, right?
Oh yeah, we all know beets are that superfood. I'm going to be all set with the amount of beets we're
There
growing.
you go. Speaking of beets, Michael is just telling us. Michael Parker, our good buddy, good friend, joining us today, was just telling us about moving up to his new ranch. And when you get up there, Michael, y'all any plans to put beets in the ground like Camden's doing?
I think the missus wants to grow a garden, so we'll see what she ends up putting in there. If I try to grow a garden, it's gonna die. I can keep animals alive, but I'm not good with plants, so I'll leave that
Yeah,
up to her.
I could picture you walking the horse through the garden right as it's starting to sprout up, going, "Oh shoot, I'm not supposed to do that, am I?"
Yeah, I would be a dead man if you never hear from me again. That's exactly what happened.
Well, there might be some extra fertilizer under the ground in that garden. That's all I'm saying. So, Michael, y'all are moving up there, and that, like we were talking about in the green room, that's going to give you your own place to start implementing, start holding retreats as part of Second Chance Ranch. So I want to know. Tell us what one of those retreats is like. Kind of walk us through. A retreat agenda, if you would.
Yeah, so uh, I guess that's the start. Best place to start is what the mission is, right? Um, there's
I mean, you can, but I wanted to know. We're going to circle back around to that.
well,
So because I'm the host, I ask the questions.
all right, all
You
right,
answer
all
the
right, all right.
questions. You see how that goes?
Ben, we're playing hardball.
All right, fine. Yeah, so we do several different recreational activities, all of which have healing properties to them. Typically, horseback riding that's a must. Um, Depending on the season, usually kayaking or canoeing, depending again where we're at. Fishing and hiking, and then we do some meditation and mindfulness while we're out hiking. That's the activity side. And then there's also we dive into purpose and identity, because that's something that a lot of veterans and first responders and for former professional athletes struggle with after they get out, is who they are when the uniform comes off. So kind of giving them some direction, if you would.
So is this over like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday? What's it? What's the time frame? Or is this all one day or what?
Yeah, it's usually 3 days. So whether it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, sometimes it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I've done them in the middle of the week before, but typically try to stick to the weekend. I find Saturday, Sunday, Monday is the best because nobody wants to go to work on Monday anyway. So I kind of like that flow. And I guess another thing too is there's nightly fireside chats where guys can open up and talk and share their stories.
How do you help to integrate people into that? Because when you start talking, like, especially like horseback riding, I think to put it bluntly, I think we're past that YouTube mark where I'm allowed to swear. I picked up a lot of horse shit. I'm not a fan of horses, so you got somebody like me going out there. I'm not really going to want to be riding around on the horse. How do you help to find those happy mediums where there's like a path for everybody inside of that same environment?
You know,
That's right. I forgot to. You forgot. I never told you that, Michael. Camden spent some time earning a couple of dollars mucking stalls when he was a kid.
That's one of my longest standing careers is mucking stalls, actually.
that's not a fun job, but it's
No, it
it's
ain't.
part. It comes with the territory. Yeah, I mean, I don't make it mandatory. I highly encourage it. Like the last retreat I did down in Texas, one of the guys didn't want to go, so he didn't ride. But everybody else did, and you'll have those guys that aren't quite sure about it. Actually, one of our good friends, Otis, Reggie, I got him on a horse for the first time in his life, and he was unsure about it. But
Dude, I
oftentimes,
wish I could have seen that. I wish I could have
I
seen
have to
that.
send you some pictures. I have my favorite picture is his horse was trotting, so I turned around and snapped a picture. And when I looked at it later, he's grinning from ear to ear, like he was so happy. I thought he was going to be terrified because his horse started running unexpectedly, and he's just having the time of his life. But sometimes it's not people's cup of tea, and that's okay. But at least you tried it, and you can say you don't like it, right? Or you end up like Reggie, who's like, "Holy crap! Like that's something I want to do more often." But that's kind of what I tell them. I was like, "Hey, like you don't have to, but I encourage it because even though you might not like, it might not seem like something you're interested in. Like to me, I was like, yoga, meditation, but it's stuff I do every day now. So you never know unless you try it. And once you do it once, you don't ever have to do it again if you don't like.
In that kind of setting, I'd be curious how you keep them as part of the group, because obviously the group is a very important part of that retreat setting. Of they'll just use me as an example. I don't want to go ride the horse. You guys are gone for the 2 hours. How do you make that integration so that people aren't feeling left out and they're still getting that camaraderie aspect?
Yeah, it's I actually offered to stay behind with that person, and he said, no, go ride. He's like, I'll cook lunch while we're going. And I think he went and did fishing. He wanted to fish. So he went fishing and started prepping lunch. But I'm not a fan of leaving somebody behind because of that aspect. But also understanding sometimes people actually want that little bit of time alone by themselves. So it's kind of just comes down to reading the situation and making sure that they're not feeling left out. So it's kind of like case by case, I would say.
How did you come up with this, agenda, the process, I guess, if you will, for these retreats that you run? Because you do the same thing, relatively speaking, depending on season and location, but it's the same process. How did you come up with that process?
Yeah, so the activities, over the years, I've experimented with a lot of things, trying to figure out what helps me with my mental health and put me in a better space. So I took those activities, and they're all fun, but they all have a healing property to them. And, just it's basically like a shotgun blast, right? Like we're trying this thing, and then hopefully at least one sticks, and typically it does. But yeah, so the activities will change a little bit, but I just kind of settled in on 4 core ones. And then depending on where and when, we might have to substitute something out, but I have a kind of a set framework on that. And then with the education, that just kind of grew, always developing, right? It kind of grew. I was noticing these trends, like everybody's saying like they don't have a purpose after they leave service, or they don't know who they are. And I realized that there was just this misunderstanding about the military, right? The military was never your purpose. It was just a mission that fueled your purpose. And so giving them that education, I figured it was easier just to incorporate it into it instead of having that conversation all the time with different people, just building it into the retreat.
Could you talk some about how, like, I guess the best way to put it would be like your personal philosophy to helping identify those different paths for those people? Because I think that's a really interesting, really leadership component of this. Of you could have all these different paths, they each find their thing that they like, whatever they might gravitate towards. But then you, as the person controlling the retreat, you still need to manage all of that and make sure they're all finding their right paths and those type of things. What's your approach there?
Yeah, it's it's just kind of structuring it. And so we're moving through, and then having that time, setting aside times where it's awesome. Like it's structured, but there's also loose time where I can sit around and talk to the guys and see where everybody's at and kind of just evaluate on the fly, which I guess is just a skill I have where I can gauge where people are at, and I'm always observing as we're going and monitoring, where, if they're excited, if they're not, if something's going on, I can pick up on it on the fly and try to address things. But it can definitely get very strenuous.
What on that, actually, before you go, Dad, the thing I'm curious about there is in your kind of approach when you're managing something and then also having to look for those soft skills. I think is a very interesting thing. Like, Dad, I know you had this experience, I'm sure, in the military, but also, as a rugby coach, you're out there, you're moving the chess pieces, you're doing all this really big picture stuff, and then you also have to pay attention to those little tiny details of the body language and all of that. How do you make sure, or I guess, like, what's your kind of approach to make sure that you're hitting both of those, not getting super fixated on, one guy whose body language is terrible and really needs extra attention, not getting too fixated on, the retreat as a whole and kind of the management side of things?
Man, it's hard sometimes, especially if you have one guy that's struggling. But what I find in that situation is if there's one, maybe two guys that are struggling, that's when you sit down and have a group session and everybody's there together and you're doing that camaraderie, that building space. And even to, I find typically those guys that are struggling, they want to talk about it. And so there's some mornings on retreats I'll be up, and I say mornings because it's 3-4 o'clock in the morning. We're still sitting around the fire talking, because you have those people, and I'm one of those that, I do it a lot. I talk, out to a lot of people, but it's not something I actually am comfortable doing. I have to push myself out of my comfort zone to do that. But you have those people that aren't comfortable in the group setting, and so they want to have that one-on-one or two. There's maybe two guys there. They rather have that smaller, more intimate session. So creating that space where they can open up and talk. And then also, I remember I brain farted when I was answering before. It comes down to, like, the understanding, and this was hard for me to get at first, is like the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Like, I can give them all the tools, but they have to be willing to accept it. And so just you're basically just a guide for them, showing them, hey, this is how to get there. And then it's up to them if they pursue on with it.
This episode of the Cam and Otis Show is brought to you by Tribe and Purpose.
Are you tired of dealing with the cost of bad leadership? It's time to make a change.
The Green Beret Leadership Program is your key to unlocking the full potential of your team.
By using GBLP to develop leaders in your business, you'll get a proactive and responsible team that embraces challenges, takes calculated risks, and takes action without constant supervision.
Developing great leaders can take a lot of time and energy, and that's why businesses tend to opt for the trial by fire and the school of hard knocks path to leadership. The truth is that wastes time and money. And folks, there's never enough of either one of those, and puts lots of extra stress on your leadership team.
Oh yeah, and that stress has lots of bad outcomes for your team. Poor leadership drives away your quality talent, and the longer you wait to fix the problem, the more talent you're going to lose and the more money you're going to lose.
With the Green Beret Leadership Program, you can use battle-tested leadership principles of the Green Berets to develop great leaders in your team faster than with the School of Hard Knocks. You'll see changes in just a few short weeks.
And the longer you wait to take action, the more damage poor leadership can do and will do to your business.
Learn more about the impact of GBLP, that's the Green Beret Leadership Program, can have on your business, and schedule your free coaching call with the Green Beret coach. That's me, folks, Otis. Now at findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP. I'll say it again, findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP, or you can click the link in the description below.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about, because you talked about it a little bit, and I want to point it out directly, because, and part of the reason I think it's popping into my mind, because I had this discussion with my mastermind last night, and that is trust. How do you, especially in a short period, like the mastermind, these are guys, and several of them, Michael, that we've been going through this for some of them a few years, 3-4 years, they've been members of it. So the trust has been established over and over again over those years. But you're talking about a bunch of dudes and maybe a couple of women that show up for 3 days, and the only way they can start to get into that healing process of sharing is having that trust. How do you set the trust factor? Because I think that's such a critical piece to what y'all do at Second Chance Ranch, and part of the success. So how can you share with us how you establish that with the guys and gals that are showing up?
I guess I just have a trustworthy face. No, but it all comes down to
Whoa! If we're doing the A/B testing on that right now, I don't know. I mean,
that was a joke. No, it comes down to just if I want them to be vulnerable, I have to be vulnerable. So opening up, being vulnerable first, and also it really helps when you have that environment where everybody's a veteran, a first responder, and even athletes as well. And you can say, hey, look, like we all put on a different uniform, but we all were, we put on that uniform and we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. Doesn't matter what capacity it is. And then you create that unity. You're like, oh yeah, like we're all one and the same. We're different, but we're one and the same. So then that creates this certain level of trust. And Otis, like two veterans can step into the room, never met, and we can typically, I mean, there's those outliers where you're like, I don't like that guy. But most of the time we can step in the room and you're like, oh, cool. And you can hit it off immediately. And so it's just about alleviating those walls there. And then also hey, like what happens here, like stays here, obviously, unless you confide in me that you're going to harm yourself, then we're going to have to do something else. But, you can open up, you can talk about that stuff and it doesn't leave this fire pit or wherever we're having this conversation.
What do you think are some of the barriers to building that trust? That whether you face them consistently or just kind of random stories you've seen, whichever way you want to put that.
I would say the hardest ones is, and I've mostly seen it on retreats I've done with other organizations. You'll have people in a leadership position, and I typically see it in the leadership positions in other places, is the comparative suffering. Like I'll share my experience, but I'm sharing it like, hey, this is what I went through, so that I'm not just full of shit. But I'm also saying like I worked through it, right? I'm not. You're coming from that. Hey, like I've been there. I've worked through it. You're kind of giving a resume more so than the comparative suffering is what I'll call it. If somebody's trying to open up to you and then you're making them feel little, like their stuff's not as important as yours, then you just destroyed any trust and any chance of building progress with that person. Which that typically comes from like a leadership place. Like if somebody's facilitating the retreat and they're pushing back like that, then you're not going to have the trust of the people you're supposed to be helping, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answered that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And really to take that into a bit more of a business situation, and this is what you're saying, but I'm gonna summarize it into the fact that it's not, this is how you do it. It's, this is how I did it. So you can pull some lessons. And I do this with my clients all the time. Here's my story. Here's how I did it. Here's how I got to this point. Here's how I got here. Not here's the steps, because my steps don't work for somebody else. To include in my business, because my business is one way, your business is another way. Just like I heal one way, you heal another way. So here's how I did it. And that shows here's some processes that may or may not work for you. And kind of going back to what you said, I was, my audio wasn't coming through, but it was in the McGregor clan, it's the no thank you bite. Right? I mean, you gotta have that no thank you bite. So give it a try. get that no thank you bite. I want to shift gears a little bit to the
sorry, Dad. Before we shift gears on that, I
yeah.
just wanted to add one other thing on like the building trust side, because
Mhm.
I think you'd make a great point, Michael, about the comparative suffering, that kind of like race to the bottom that happens. And I think what we get to is this area where we have this thing that's affecting us that's really, usually when it gets into mental health stuff, it's really hard to define. And so we kind of put into these big buckets, and then so you look at everyone else that's in that bucket and you kind of do this comparison thing, but it's all completely individual. You know, it reminds me of when I had my back injury and I was seeing a doctor, and he's like, yeah, 80% of Americans have back pain. And I was like, well, thanks, doc. My back hurts, though, and that's all I care about right now. I don't care that 80% of people are going through this. Because even when you see other people going through, we kind of get into that comparison thing. And so I just wanted to really hammer on that, because I think the comparison is just going to become that race to the bottom. Whereas when you just look at it as your individual story, I can learn from your story, Michael, even if it's completely different than mine. But when you start to get into that race to the bottom, I don't think there's anyone that's learning from that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I noticed I like what you said about that approach is exactly what I've been trying to say, and you said it the best. The hey, like, this is how I navigated it, and in letting them understand, like, just because that's how I did it doesn't mean that's your path. And like I've started doing coaching with people as well, and that's exactly what I say. I'm like, look, like, I can help you kind of push forward. I can give you my experience, but you have to find your own path. And I'll just here to help you see roadblocks in your way. But ultimately, you got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah. So now let's shift because I think this is a really interesting piece that I know through being friends with you and working with you for a number of years, that this has been the biggest struggle, is how do you sustain this? Because we can all be passionate about helping people, be passionate about saving somebody and helping them live a happier life and all these sort of things. But that can only go so far, because, oh, by the way, I still got to eat. I still got to have a roof over my head. I got to take care of my family. Talk to us a little bit about how you first off, how you came from, I want to help everybody. I've got this great idea to help people, to that first time you went, oh crap, I can't help any more people unless I figure out how to get money, how to make a business out of this. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that was probably the hardest struggle, because I opted not to go the nonprofit route. Because everybody's like, you're a nonprofit. No, I'm not. I'm an LLC. And that was a hard decision. So then you're not going out looking for donations. You got to find other ways to kind of raise that money. And like with the retreats, I do charge, which I get backlash from people. Whatever, haters gonna hate. But my philosophy is you have to have some skin in the game. You have to have some investment. And I've seen from experience that if you do it for free, there's no commitment on them. They either don't take anything away from it, or they don't show up at all. And then I typically see that on ones I partner up with nonprofits and they want to host it for free. They'll be like, we've had one specific example. They're like, we have 15 veterans coming out. I'm like, cool. We had 3 besides the person from that organization and myself. So 5 total, but 3 participants. And so they were out, like, I want to say it was like $12,000 for those other people, and they can't get that money back. I'm like, that's a waste of resources that could have gone. So you have to have some kind of investment. But then again, I don't charge veterans and first responders that full price. So, well, how do I cover the rest of that? So what I came up with is finding sponsors, and getting sponsors to host, or not host, to, well, sometimes host the retreat, but usually, sponsor a vet, sponsor a couple veterans. And I found that the sponsorship option was the best way. Now, like I said, I've started doing the coaching, which will help keep the ranch up and going. And even with that, as I start to get horses, getting businesses to sponsor a horse for the year or the month or whatever to cover the cost, so we can continue to do it at an affordable rate for little no cost for veterans and first responders.
On kind of staying in that same side of, you know, making it a sustainable business model, how do you look at it in terms of like the events themselves? Because, you know, an event space is another one. You know, you talked some about various various places you can go, different weather, different things you can do, but it's still going to be a pretty cyclical business model, I'm sure. You know, I don't know your weather over there, you know, Arkansas, Missouri area, but I'm guessing there's certain months out of the year where you're not getting anybody come out there, no matter, you know, even if you made it free, you're not going to get anyone to sign up. How do you approach that, like, cyclical nature of the business?
Yeah, that's why I'm happy we're getting land, right? Because I can get horses and people can still come out and go horseback riding. And that's when you got to get some coaching clients, right? To kind of offset, make it through the winter. But I can also find there's places that stay relatively warm all year long. So I can go to a warmer location and put on a retreat, which I'll try to do 2 or 3 during the winter months to keep things moving. You do in the majority of your retreats during the spring to early fall time, but during the winter, like Florida doesn't get that cold. You got California if you really want to go to California.
You got Tucson. Don't forget Tucson.
Hey, you know what? I didn't even think about. Yeah, Arizona's probably pretty decent as well. See, hey, look.
I'm not sure how much horseback riding we got out here, though. But there's some trails, and you know, you just got to watch out for the snakes and whatnot.
Yeah. So, as you start to develop the business side of this, what would you say was the biggest hurdle in that? Was it finding sponsors? Was it the mind shift that you got to do that? What was that? What was that big hurdle that you had to really get over?
Yeah, I would say fear of rejection, and to be completely transparent, a little bit of fear of success as well, right? Like, I don't even think it was fear of failure for me, because if I failed, I'd be like, I knew it, right? But the what if you,
there you go.
what if this blows up and becomes what you envisioned it to be? What then? And that's kind of been my journey, is more I talked about it a couple weeks ago, is faith, right? Like, faith is complete confidence and trust, and like, I'm a man of faith, so I realized that it's been a journey of faith, but it wasn't about my faith in whoever you believe in, right? It was faith in myself. I didn't have the complete confidence and trust in myself that I could do this. So over the last 4 years, it's been growing that confidence in my abilities to do this. I'll say that's probably been the biggest obstacle, and being worthy.
So actually, that sets up even
if
better.
You're
what I was going to say.
Good. So, as long as you're touching on the imposter syndrome.
Yes, sir. So
right,
I was thinking it honestly in the green room a little bit. You know, talking about buying the ranch. I've had some businesses where I'm selling something that I'm still working on, and we're getting a little bit ahead of it. I know how easily that imposter syndrome sneaks in. You were selling trips to a ranch, and you didn't have a ranch. I could only see, you know, you talk about the fear of success, and you have this thing that you believe in entirely, but you don't have the literal ranch to go take people to and that kind of thing. Oh, well, it's somebody else's ranch. All of those things are places where that imposter syndrome sneaks in. How did you deal with that? And, you know, or any advice that you could take from those lessons?
Yeah, man, that's always an interesting conversation. People are, I can't wait to come visit the ranch. And then I've got to be like, I know it says ranch in the name. Like, all we're doing right now are the retreats, right? Which
I'm laughing because I'm thinking the address is.
I'll
see you there.
The address is my.
I want to get out to the ranch. I want to get out to the ranch. Hey, let me just call Otis, see if this weekend works. We'll see what can happen.
No, I'm just transparent. I learned to be transparent about it, you know, and At first there was shame. It's like, look, like I don't have land. I mean, at first I had some acreage of my grandparents where I had a couple horses, so they could at least come out. And then I made a pivot that didn't pay out, and now I've got nothing. And I'm like, yeah, look, like the ranch is my house right now, right? Like the master bedroom is Second Chance Ranch. But the land, and I would say, but we're getting the land, like we're getting there, you know, because I know it's coming, right? So it's just something that, yeah, there's definitely some shame in that, but I also knew like it was coming, and I was doing what I had to do to keep pushing forward, right? Because initially my plan was get land, and then once we kind of got the ranch set up, then start doing the retreats. But very quickly I realized, hey, getting that land is going to be a lot harder than I anticipated. So what do I do now? And that kind of stemmed out of that shame, because people were reaching out wanting help, and I'm like, I don't have land. And I hated that, because I don't like those people that you see that appear to just be talking about stuff but not be doing anything about it. And I felt like I was being one of those people. Even though I knew I was progressing forward, I felt like that kind of person in other people's eyes. So that's when I was like, hey, let's put these retreats together. We can do that without land. Like I can go use the state parks. Like I got permission to go use the state parks, do the camping. And I started formulating it that way and using what I had. Bootstrap, if you will.
So, yeah, well, and I'm sure you had this syndrome going on in your head that you didn't want to be all hat, no cow in that sense, right? I mean, because, yeah, but I'll tell you, one of the things that I think is great about this is the struggle of that. And if you had the land right from the get-go, I think you wouldn't be as successful as you are now, because what it's forced you into is truly honing and refining the concept of it. And everything comes along at the right time, you know. And if somebody had said, hey, Michael, here's 10 acres, here's 100 acres, whatever, and here's 20 horses and blah, blah, do whatever, it's yours, you probably would have screwed it up.
I was about to say, I would have failed. I would have failed miserably. We wouldn't be talking right now.
Yeah, you'd have dead horses and you'd be a Walmart greeter. I mean, that's what would have happened. I know you well enough, and I know you'd figure something out. You wouldn't have been a Walmart greeter. You might have been a cashier. But the point is, the struggle was there, and I think you were forced into it. It wasn't what you wanted. But there's a lesson in the business side of this that I think is so powerful that we should all look at it. And it's what's the process? What's the steps? Because if you try to skip a step, that's where the failure happens. And you went through this unbeknownst to you, but looking back on it, I'd love for you to reflect on this with us a little bit. Is that realization as you look back on it and go, this is actually a better path now. So reflect back on that path that's got you to where you are to now where it's, man, excited.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the whole journey, like I dove into it, like I was homeless, unemployed, right? And I was like, okay, well, we just got to build these steps. And I was putting in all that work, and then I was like, I'll just get investors, right? And we'll get this together. And like that was kind of my mindset. And I'm glad I had that. I thought it was going to be easier than it was, or I probably would have never engaged in it. But then by the point I realized that, I was already too committed to turn back. So I was like, well, we're just going to figure this shit out however we have to. But then, you know, obviously COVID hit in 2020, which derailed a lot of, I would say it messed up plans. It didn't really derail things because I realized it helped me in other areas because, hey, cool. Now I get to talk to all these people that know a lot more than I do because they're sitting at home with nothing to do. Like Otis. Well, Otis wasn't sitting at home with nothing to do, but you know what I mean. I gotta talk with like Otis and other people.
We talked. You can. I wasn't sitting at home with doing nothing, but we did talk.
But I gotta be in these rooms that I would have never been in before because everything moved online, and so I was able to get a lot of education. So it wasn't a complete derail. It was a different direction than I thought, and I realized very quickly that it wasn't going to be as easy to get that land. So then pivoting. But like we said, like I would have screwed up if I had gotten that big chunk of land. And like even now, as I've got that 9 acres, I'm like, man, that's not a lot of land. I can only put a couple horses on that. But realizing, hey, like no, that's the next step. If you can't be trusted with the 9 acres, then how are you going to do 100 acres? Let alone down the road have the plan is to have several locations across the country. Like if we can't manage the 9 acres, we can't take care of the large ranch, and if we can't take care of one large ranch, we can't take care of multiple. It's the process you build up. Like I guess you look at like McDonald's or Walmart, right? They started with one location, and it was successful. And and you build and grow out from there. They didn't just go out one day and open 500 Walmarts across the country, right?
Mm-hmm. This episode of the Cam and Otis Show is brought to you by Evergood Adventure Wines.
Our loyal listeners know Evergood's founder, Matthew Hexter, and our good friend. From his appearances on the show, they have never disappointed. And Evergood Adventure Wines doesn't disappoint either.
No, it doesn't. Evergood is a craft winery from Colorado that makes wine from lemons, not grapes.
That's right. Picture this, adult lemonade.
Oh yeah, perfect for your next backyard barbecue or hanging out with friends at the beach or the pool. No need to drink a warm red grape wine when it's 100 degrees out or much hotter here in Tucson. Evergood over ice is the perfect refreshment for a hot summer day.
And they come in a variety of flavors, including lemon, strawberry, lime, my favorite for margaritas, grapefruit, and watermelon, which comes in a cool pouch, by the way. These non-carbonated wines check all the boxes. Gluten-free, vegan, low sugar, and low in sulfites. Best of all, they taste damn good, and they have fun names, too.
Yeah, like their OG lemon wine called Skierpy. Yeah, y'all heard that one right, Skierpy. And I'll tell you, Skierpy is also one of my favorites.
Evergood now ships to 41 states, so you can order your lemon wines online at evergoodadventurewines.com.
Plus, Matthew is being kind enough to offer 20% off for all of our listeners. Just use promo code CAM-OTIS at checkout to get 20% off and start enjoying these amazing lemon wines.
So y'all go to evergoodadventurewines.com. Yeah, boy, evergoodadventurewines.com. That's a mouthful, folks. I'm going to say it the third time. evergoodadventurewines.com. Or click the link in the description in the show. Click Buy Now to redeem your Cam and Otis Show exclusive discount.
Yeah. And I think that's a big lesson, even just moving into other businesses, like you're saying with Walmart or anything else, that it's like when you have the bootstrap business model and you're kind of forced to run things really lean and, make all of those adjustments yourself because it's really just you running the business and all that kind of stuff. It sets you up for success when you do actually have that success that starts coming so you can build on top of it, versus like you get the venture capital that comes out. Hey, here's, 500-acre ranches in 5 different states. Here you go, Michael, go do it. And you're right. When you have that, you're probably going to fail in those different areas because as you bootstrap it, you find a lot of problems that you can fix and build those processes around so that you can be successful there. What is your process, I guess, or what is your process looking forward to this ranch now and then kind of building up that so you can keep that pipeline going, not bite off more than you can chew and just really keep building up those processes to that point when you have the 5 ranches in different states and all that kind of stuff, you're ready for it.
Yeah, it's just taking it one step at a time. Like I've already, been out there looking at the lands, like how are we going to do this, right? Like, okay, cool. There's some side-by-side trails out there that I can clean up and use as horse trails. And I've talked to my buddy's uncle who owns 18 acres that connects to it. And the trails go onto his property. And I've already talked to him about riding horses out there. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. Just stay away from where I deer hunt over here. And I'm like, got it. I've already seen that. Like, I'll stay away from that area. But, so we can ride the horses. I don't even need more land for that. I can use that. Picking out spots. I've already picked out spots. I'm like, hey, like if I clean this up, this can be a spot for guys that want to just come out and do some meditation, mindfulness, whatever. We'll set that up as a spot. I'm like, okay, this is where we're gonna build a pasture. This is where we're gonna put a round pen to work horses. And kind of just those little steps. And what do we do first? What do we do next? And kind of just what's started building. What's the next step? And like for me, it's like, okay, the easiest step and the most logical is, hey, let's go clean up some sanctuary spaces so people can come out and just be out in nature, right? Building the fire pit so we can have group chats, fireside chats if people want to come out. Then start building the pasture, because that's going to take a little bit of money to buy that, to buy buy all the T-posts and the barbed wire and all that fun stuff. I'm like, let's start with the simple stuff that can get some people out here, right? Sanctuary space.
I'm just laughing because I remember when we first bought our ranch, you and I talking about you coming up and fencing the whole thing, which that would have been interesting. You would have had some pretty strong hands by the time you were done with that one.
Yeah, I never got that phone call to come do it.
Yeah, well, when Miss Suzanne realized that having Mr. Mesta's cattle on our land meant that our land was also agriculture, let's just say that changed her attitude. She welcomes the cattle. But I was going to jump back into the future business stuff, but you touched on something, and I've always thought this is interesting, and I'd love to get your opinion, because you mentioned the fire, and our buddy James Corbett with Project Refit talks about the same thing. And I can tell you at hunt camp, it's warmth and there ain't no TVs or radio, so we always called it Ranger TV. What is your philosophy? What just your personal thought process on what the hell's the big deal with sitting around a fire that makes us all the caveman or whatever? Give us your perspective on that.
Oh man, it's at the end of the day, right? You've usually had a long day and you're just trying to chill. You got that fire crackling, that nice little light illuminating the dark. There's still, something about guys sitting around. You can only kind of halfway see each other's face and you can have that conversation. I think it creates like what feels like a safe, I hate using the word safe, but like this comfortable environment where you're okay with opening up and talking, and whether it's lighthearted stuff about what you did that day, laughing about things, or which is typically how it starts, right? It always starts with lighthearted, and then as it progresses, you start talking about the more intense stuff. I think it's just because that fire is warm and cozy, and it just kind of invites you in, and there's something about it that you're just like, hey, I want to open up and tell you my life story. I don't know. There's some kind of something going on there.
Well, and go ahead, Camden, because I was going to say this is something I just learned, and it was going to be my lesson learned for today. But go ahead, I'll wrap.
All right, so I want to see if we're on the same page again, because we were on the same page earlier when we got into that. But no, so the thing I was thinking is, I heard this once talking about a lot of differences between male friendships and female friendships, and one of the big differences is that a lot of men, a lot of my best friends, I'm sure for both y'all, most of your best friends, it's people you do work with. It's people I played rugby with. We spend hours and hours and hours together, but it's shoulder to shoulder was the term I heard. Where it's always shoulder to shoulder. We're not looking at each other. We're talking, but it's always we're doing something. And that's the way that a lot of men like to bond, rather than that face to face. And I was kind of thinking, sitting around a campfire, you're looking at the campfire. We're all managing the campfire. but we're really not doing anything, because that opens you up to a lot more of what would be like that face-to-face conversation and those type of things, while you still get to feel like you're a tough guy because you're man in the fire. We're not actually looking at each other, lots of eye contact and those kind of things. I think there might be a little bit of something going on with that.
And on your point, you're still kind of shoulder to shoulder, kind of, but you're also kind of face to face. It's like a happy medium, and you got that fire there in the middle to. I think you're onto something,
right? Because if we were having an actual conversation about stuff, just looking at each other, that's a little soft. Come on. But if we're looking at a fire while we talk about that stuff, then okay, now I'm still a tough man, right?
Yeah, I mean, even like when you're sitting there talking with somebody, you want to sit on the porch. Like, you don't sit. Like when I came and met Otis for the first time, we sat on the porch and we did not sit facing each other. We sat, I mean, kind of, but we were still facing outward, right? So we're like having a conversation, but we're looking at the scenery. Like, you're not sitting there face to face, direct eye contact the whole time. Like, men, we don't do that. Like, we want to look at something.
Yeah.
Well, and here's my theory along with what I learned today. It's the Lord of the Flies. The campfire, and Michael, what you said is that partial covering. And for those of you not familiar with the whole Lord of the Flies theory, first off, go read the book. My God, it's a classic. But the theory of the Lord of the Flies, the thesis is that we can hide behind the mask. And when we hide behind the mask, we can be somebody, our true self, or even somebody we say we want to be, that we're ashamed of being because we're hiding behind the mask. And there's a whole lot of psychology and theories all the way, from the novel to Abu Ghraib and I'm thinking, even in this sense, when we talk about the fire, it's a combination. So it's the man, shoulder to shoulder men talk, which means they're working. You got to be activity. But there's also there's a little bit of the cloaking in that darkness, because if we were to have a campfire in the middle of the day, it wouldn't be the same. Think about when you have a fire. If you're having a fire to cook and cook a lunch, that's different. You don't sit around that fire and talk. You work. That fire is for creating food, sustenance. But in the evening, when there's darkness and there's a bit of maybe even shelter in that low lighting, there's a whole different aspect. So that's now I'm going to have to bring Lord of the Flies with me out to hunt camp, and we'll have a whiskey and look at Lord of the Flies and make fun of each other in the darkness. So, Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
I was just going to add that little bit of the face covering. I do think is a big piece of it, because I'm thinking all sorts of conversations I've had around campfires. You don't want to look at the person. You don't want to. Come on, that's too emotional. You got to look away. You get that little bit of cover. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also got to add, of course, I think it does just go back to the caveman brain a little bit. Fire good. Fire is very good. But it's all those things at once, of course. But no, for me, what I learned today was, this is something that I think we've talked about, and I think it gets preached a lot, and it's a really difficult lesson to learn, which is that when it comes to like imposter syndrome, one of the best ways to beat it is to be transparent. The exact opposite of what it feels like you should do is, be transparent in that situation, because then they'll know I'm an imposter. But in reality, when you do that, they realize that you're not, that you are working towards those goals. And I think that's something I've struggled with in business, with coaching rugby, all those kind of things. And so, Michael, to hear you talk about how that transparency helped you to beat that imposter syndrome, very inspiring for me to stay on that path, because it's one where I think I know I definitely thought this. I'm sure a lot of people do, where it's like, oh, I just have to be transparent this once. I just got to level with Michael right here, and then, oh, the imposter syndrome will be gone. It's like, no, you got to level with everybody for years, and then eventually that voice stops talking to you. And that's the really encouraging thing of that, is seeing it work with somebody else,
including yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. Michael, how about you? What'd you learn?
I'd say trust in the process. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but knowing that there's a process and trusting it, and knowing that you're going to get where you're going.
Awesome. Michael, how do folks follow you, learn more about Second Chance Ranch, even when's your next retreat happen?
We are working on some for next year. I don't have any set ones yet. Right now the focus has just been on moving out onto the land. So to find out about that, you can visit 2crranch.com. You'll find retreat dates on there. The best way to get in contact with me is LinkedIn. Michael Parker. I'm sure you'll post a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
That's the best place to get a hold of me. I'm not really. I mean, I'm on other social media, but I don't check those other social medias. And if you want to follow the ranch, we're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Second Chance Rehabilitation Ranch.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, Michael, it's always great to catch up with you and get a little insight into what's going on with Second Chance Ranch, man. Appreciate your time.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me here. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Camden Otis Show, and a special thanks to our guest, Michael Parker, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at the Camden Otis Show. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to share with other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of our episodes is available at www.camdenotisshow.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.